Hey there, Mindsetters. Welcome to grade 11 Maths Literacy today with Peter. Peter, if you can actually tell us what happened last week and this week so these guys know what they're doing.
Well, last week we started looking at graphs, and this week we're continuing
Graphs.
with graphs.
And some couple of equations.
And we're going to try and make it a little more interesting, a little more difficult, and have some real challenging questions. How was your week?
My week was pretty good. It was pretty good. Interesting stuff, interesting news as always. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
I had a great week as well. In fact, yesterday I went off. I'm not allowed to tell you where though, because then that's false advertising, and we're not allowed to advertise.
Yes,
but I had a
yes.
wonderful time
At Bleep.
at Bleep, swimming in waves and things like that. It was really great, but it wasn't at Durban. So it was really a wonderful week. It really was great. But while I was there, I saw a little boy, and he was eating raisins. And his mom said to him, "Hey, Aki, what you doing?" He says, "I'm eating him raisins, Ma." And the mom said, "But Aki, where are you getting him raisins from?" He said, "Oh, I'm getting raisins off this dog." Listen, guys, I don't have any jokes today. That was my best one, and it's really lame. So maybe you want to send us some.
Please, guys, please do. Always, we love to have fun with Peter's show, as they are always amazing. Fun. So, guys, make sure you get those posts in. If you do get lost anywhere or you need a bit more explanation, guys, post on the Facebook page. And guys, don't forget, also Meet the Mindsetter. We'll be playing at the end of this show again. Guys, story of Mazoy. I hope it's inspiring you and you guys are pushing. And for those of you who might be writing tomorrow, guys, good luck for your exams and hope this lesson helps. Guys, we'll see you after this break. Welcome back, Mindsetters, to grade 12 Maths Literacy. Hope you guys are paying attention. I hope you've had a nice little break because we're back. We're going to be doing some more work right now. We're going to do a couple of examples for you guys so you can just wrap your head around this entire subject. And I'm going to hand over to Peter now, who's going to continue with this subject. Are you feeling better?
I'm feeling better. I've had a drink of water. Thank you very much. I don't know what
Nice.
happened.
Yeah.
Sometimes that happens. Your voice just goes all funny and things
It's like,
that.
I've got no control.
No control at all. All right. Before the break, we said ZAR. Remember we spoke about ZAR, and we said, where did that come from? Well, during the break, I was just advised that, and I said that every country has a code.
Yeah.
And the ZAR actually belongs to Saudi, or SAR belongs to Saudi Arabia. And that's why we can't have South African rands. So we've got the ZAR, which is quite interesting. Eh? Right, just for interest's sake, today's exchange rate, the rand dollar, 7 rand 72. The euro, 10 rand 18, which means for every 7 rand 72 I give over to the bank, they will give me $1 US. But to get a euro, if I give them 7.72, they're going to say, "Guy, you're short, pal. Very short. You've got to pay us 10 rand 18 to get 1 euro. Okay. There was a question that someone's asked, and the question was, Ty, can you remember?
Yes. Actually, Pindile wanted to find out, how do we identify a compound graph?
A compound graph, okay. Then that's more when we start dealing with statistics, okay, and that's something we can tackle if we have time after this. But I think one of our viewers asked a question, how can you identify a compound interest graph compared to a simple interest graph? And that's to do with graphs. I'd rather answer that one for now.
Okay.
And if we don't have time to answer
Pindile.
Pindile's question, we can maybe do it on a reply on Facebook. But if we've got time, we'll answer here.
We'll do.
Okay, so here's the question. If I have simple interest and if I have compound interest, how would I draw those graphs? What would be the difference between those graphs? And guys, it's quite simple. Simple interest, simple. Okay, and this is it. With simple interest, I'm getting the same interest every single year on my money. Okay, so let's say I were to invest 100 rand into a bank, and they're saying to me, we will give you 10% interest every single year. At the end of the first year, I get 10%. Now, we know that 10% of 100 rand is 10 rand. So what I'm going to do at the end of year 1, I land up with 110 rand. At the end of year 2, I've got 110 rand plus 10 rand because it's simple interest. My interest stays the same every year. Simple interest is calculated on the amount of money I put in the bank. I put 100 Rand in, I'm getting 10% on that, I've got 10 Rand. So if I had 110 Rand and I'm getting another 10 Rand, I've got 120 Rand. Year 3, again, I've got 220 Rand. I'm being silly here, okay? No, I'm lying. I have got 120 Rand. Okay, teacher going quite mad. I think the choking of the waters made it all go wrong. Now, I got 120 Rand in the bank. After another year, I'm still getting 10%, which is 10 Rand. I had 120 Rand, getting another 10 Rand. I'll end up with 130 Rand in the bank. Now, were I to draw this on a graph, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to say, right, if I have a set of axes, and let's give ourselves a nice set of axes over here. There's one, and let's draw another one over there. Okay, now I have a set of axes. Over here, I've got my years on my horizontal, and on my vertical axis, I got the amount of money in the bank. Okay, when I put the money into the bank, how much did I put in? I put in 100 Rand. So my starting point is not at 0, because if I put nothing into the bank, and I go after 4 years and say, hey, I've come to draw my money, they're going to say, pal, you got nothing. Yeah, but I got nothing, I want the interest. Well, there's no interest on no money, okay? So I'm not starting at 0, I'm putting money in the bank. But every year, my money is increasing by the same amount. Now, remember earlier in the program, we spoke about this word constant. As soon as there's a constant, I know I've got a straight line. So if I've got a constant increase, it means my increase is the same every single year, and it's going to be 10 Rand. So my line now is going to be a straight line starting from that point, and that's what's going to happen to my money. Okay? Do we understand that? So simple interest, my interest amount is increasing the same every single year, and because there's a constant increase, I'm getting that straight line. Now, with compound interest, what I'm actually saying now is this, that, and let's just do this like this, let's use yellow. In my first year, let's say I take my 100 Rand and I deposit it in the bank, I'm still getting 10% interest every year. So at the end of my first year, I've got 110 Rand. At the end of my second year, I've got interest on the balance, the current balance, which is 110 Rand. 10% of that is 11 Rand, so my balance now is 121 Rand. Can you notice with simple interest, it was 120 after 2 years, with compounds 121. And as we do these figures, so my difference is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So were I to sketch that on a graph, I'm still going to start here, but my graph is going to do that. I'm going to get higher and higher and higher. Why? Because my interest is getting more and more and more every month or every year. And I think that's me done for today. And I'm sorry we couldn't answer the other question, but time has run out. Every week time catches us.
Always. But it's always a fun session with you, Peter.
Thank you.
As always. And guys, you know what? I actually just found this out from my producer who's in my ear just now, like about Indy's condition. Apparently, Indiana is expecting.
She is? Does Indiana know this?
I'm not too sure, but that would explain the bit of a sickness there.
Yeah, I don't know why she's saying that. Hey, apparently, no, it's not true. It is not true. She just got sick. That's it. Okay?
But yeah, guys, this is another session. I hope you guys had fun. Hope it was helpful. Guys, again, keep talking to each other on the page. Keep having fun with the Facebook page. Although we're not going to be live, guys, doesn't mean that you can't stop talking to each other on the page. And for now, guys, we're going to see you later. Bye. Welcome back, Mindsetters, to grade 12 maths literacy. I hope you guys are paying attention. You guys have been writing your notes. This is helpful stuff. I know some of you guys are going to be writing some big exams soon, so guys, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. But for now, I'm going to give it back to Peter, who's going to continue with the rest of the lesson.
Right, hi guys. We're busy looking at graphs, as we said earlier. You know, people are commenting and they're saying, look, do you actually love your wife? I want to tell you, I have the best wife on the earth. I really do. She's fantastic, wonderful. And maybe one day I should bring her into studio just so that you can see we do talk to each other and she doesn't slap me every time she sees me. Well, not in public anyway. And I have a wonderful son and everything. And we're actually a very close-knit family. And that's why we can rip each other off. So if you're concerned about my wife's well-being out there, thank you very much for caring. But all's well at home, I can assure you. All right, we're looking at graphs, and just before the break, we looked at a graph that was a bar graph as well as a line graph. And up to now, in grade 11, we hadn't come across things like that, so this is kind of new for grade 12. Now what we're doing is not only are we going to look at a bar graph and a line graph, but we're now going to look at a set of vertical axes on one side of the graph and a set of vertical axes on another side of the graph. And they're going to be totally different axes, and yet all on the same graph. Now, you've never come across this before in grade 11, so it's exciting, new, wonderful stuff. Let's have a look at it. So on our screen then, the graph below shows the average maximum temperature and rainfall figures for town X in Africa in 2007. Okay. Now, I know you've had a look at this and you've said, why have they called it Town X? The examiner's been extremely lazy and I couldn't think of a name and just put X. He couldn't even be bothered to look at a map and say it's going to be Johannesburg or Pofadderfontein. Do you know that there's a place called Pofadder?
I had no clue till now.
No,
Thank you for that.
In fact, there's even a place called Pietrusville. And my mom, when she was married with me, used to call me Pietrus. And then I knew I was in trouble. Yes. So you get all these funny towns, so many names, and yet the person who set this paper couldn't even be bothered to look for a name. Let's not run the person down. There's a reason they did that, and you'll pick up the reason just now. So the graph shows both the temperature, the average maximum temperature. So let's just have a look at this. Now, you know what an average temperature is, okay? The average temperature is the average between the maximum and the minimum, and you get an average for that day. Now, what you can do is you can get three different types of averages. You can look at all the maximum temperatures for that entire month and get the average maximum. You can look at all the minimum temperatures for that month and get the average minimum. Then you can look for all the average temperatures that month and get the averages per month. That's complicated. Normally we say the average temperatures. In this case, we're looking for the average maximum temperatures. And that's what this is all about. The next thing is the rainfall figures for Capex in Africa. All right, so having a look at this then, we now look at our graph, and you can see, let's start with the easy part, our horizontal axis. Months in 2007, January, February, March, April, May, June, all the way up to December. Those are the same months in 2008 and 2012, obviously, okay? So it's our months in the year. Then we've got an axis here that says the rainfall in millimeters. On our right, we have something called the maximum temperature in degrees. Oy, oy, oy. Now we've got to look at this and say, hold on, we've got rainfall and we've got maximum temperature. What is actually going on here? Because we're using the vertical axis for two entirely different things. One's for rainfall, one's for temperature. Are we allowed to do this? Of course we're allowed to do this. In fact, in grade 12, you guys are going to come across things called percentiles later on, probably towards the fourth term or end of third term, when you look at different types of graphs, and it normally comes under the whole section of stats, okay? And you look at these whole things called percentiles. And percentiles, I won't tell you what that is now, we'll discuss it at a much later stage in the year, but percentiles could be a comparison between growth and weight, okay? Or between height and weight. And so you can have two different axes where you're saying, what is the weight of the baby and what's the height of the baby? Let's compare the two, Okay, and on my horizontal axis, I could have how old the kid is in months or even in years, whatever the case is. Normally, we talk about how old the baby is in months. So we can see how old he is, we can see what weight he should be, and how tall he should be. So we've got a whole lot of information, 3 bits of information on one graph. Here, we've got also 3 bits of information. We got the months, we got the rainfall, and we've got the maximum temperature. Okay, so how do I know what is what here? How do I know which is my temperature and which is my rainfall? Well, let's have a look. If we're dealing with our line, we could say our rainfall at this stage, we've got round about, oops, let's get a pen here, there it is. At this point here, we've got close on 80 millimeters. Could we say that the line represents my temperature, and so at this stage here, we've got round about 20 degrees, okay? Well, we could have 80 millimeters of rain, and we could have 20 degrees. Okay, the average in that month, right? Let's keep looking. At this point over here, let's have a look at this. What are we talking about? Well, we could say my rainfall is just under 80 as well, or the temperature's under 20, and at this point we could be talking about the rainfall being 60 mils, or the temperature being 15 degrees. Okay? Guys, which is which? Well, normally the examiner would tell you the line represents my temperature, or the bar graph represents my temperature, and the other way around for the actual rainfall. Okay? So in this question, it hasn't told us this. All it has said is this, that we've got the average maximum temperature and the rainfall figures. It has not said to us, listen guys, the line is the rainfall, okay, or the bar is the rainfall. It hasn't said either that it could be the other way around. So quite naughty of this examiner, because now it's put you in a bit of a predicament. Okay. And this is what I want to stop and tell you, is this. Guys, when you are in matric and you're writing that final paper, you as the student is always, always, always given the benefit of the doubt. So if you've interpreted a question in a way that could have been interpreted in 2 different ways, the examiners and the markers have to give you the benefit of the doubt. Of course, if you've interpreted it in your way and it's no way possible to interpret it like that, well then you just get naught. Okay, so looking at that. Now, give the highest and lowest temperature recorded. Well, again, it all depends which is my temperature and which is my rainfall. If this is my temperature, then I'm going to say the highest temperature recorded was in December, and it was around about 29 degrees. My lowest temperature recorded was probably here in September, and that would have been just under 20 degrees. And remember, it's my lowest, highest average. Okay. Now, if we looked at the bar graph as my temperature, then the bar graph would have been August would have been my highest, and December would have been my lowest. Now, normally the temperature is the bar, and normally the rainfall would be the line. That's the bar would be the rain, and the line would be the temperature, normally. But again, we can't stipulate that. So the examiner would have had to have told us that. Right, moving on. Is town X in the northern or southern hemisphere? Give a reason for your answer. All right, now, if we were looking at my bars as my temperature, then we could say, you know what, in these months, June, July, August, it really gets hot. Okay, so because it's so hot, we know that this must be in the northern hemisphere, because my temperatures are high when we here in South Africa, in the southern hemisphere, are having bitterly cold weather. Okay, here we can't really tell. What we could say is, well, in this case, maybe if this was our temperature, then we could say we were more or less in the, well, we could say we're in the southern hemisphere because our temperatures are getting a lot hotter here. But again, folk, it all depends whether our bars represent our temperature or whether they represent our rainfall. Okay? The examiner should have told us that, otherwise it makes it very, very difficult to interpret this. All right, I'm going to move on to our next question, and let's have a look at this. So study the graph below, and then answer the following questions. Exchange rate, the Rand US dollar versus the Rand Euro. Okay, so let's analyze our graph. Here we've got year 2000, we've got the year 2001, and the year 2002. And in between those years, we have a whole lot of little lines, okay, which are going to represent certain parts of that year. If there were 12 lines between the years, we'd say, hey, each of these lines represent a month. But in this case, from 2000 all the way here to 2001, there are more than 12 little lines. Can you see all those lines? So each line is not representing a month. It's probably representing a quarter of a month or so. Okay, so that's what our graph looks like. We've got two different things we're looking at. We're looking at the difference between the Rand and the dollar, and that's this line over here. And I'm just going to draw a green line above it, just so that you know that that's what we're looking at. And my other line is going to be the euro. Okay, the Rand versus euro. You got that? So you can understand the two things we're looking at. We're looking at a comparison between the Rand and the dollar and the Rand and the euro. Cool? Right. Now, in fact, should we analyze this even further before we look at the question? If you look at this, you can see that the Rand is a lot higher. You get more dollars for your Rand than what you would euros. Now, that's suddenly different, eh? Because currently, you're going to get more rands for a euro than what you would for a dollar. In fact, I think the Rand tie is somewhere around 7 Rand 20, somewhere around there.
To the US.
Okay,
yes.
to the US dollar. But for the euro, I think it's about 10 Rand something to the euro.
10 to 12, somewhere around there.
So it's, the euro is got a lot more buying power than the dollar. Okay, now, what was the highest and what was the lowest Rand dollar exchange? Right, let's look at it. Over here, we've got our highest, right? And what was it? Well, it was, here's the rate, it was round about 120, nearly 125. 125 what? Well, it just says the rate. So 125. Now, let's say you're in an exam and you're thinking, what is this rate? Is it rands? Is it cents? Is it a percentage? What is it? Okay, don't panic. They've asked you what is the rate. You can say the rate is 125. That's it. Why? They haven't told you the units, so they can't expect you to know the units. Next one. Looking at that, when is it at its lowest? I would say it's at its lowest right at that point there. Notice the Rand dollar is higher, 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 and just before 2000, it got lower. So when was it at its low? It was low at 20, and what was the rate? The rate was 60. Okay, now let's move on and have a look at our next question. What was the highest and what was the lowest Rand Euro exchange rate during the time period? Now they're saying, okay, so you found it for one graph, now go and find it for the other graph. So we found it for the Rand dollar, now find it for the Rand Euro. So the Rand Euro is this graph over here, the bottom graph, and I would say that's it at its highest. And what is it there? It's around about 110. And where is it at its lowest? Well, its lowest is probably this point over here, which is just above 60. Okay? So what's the examiner doing? He's saying, right, let's make sure these guys can read the graph, first of all. And second of all, let's make sure that they can tell the difference between the two different graphs. Does he know where the Rand Euro is? Does he know where the Rand dollar graph is? Happy? Of course you are, I know you are. Okay, now, let's move on. In fact, hey Ty, I've got some exciting news. Well, first of all, a bit of sad news. I believe today is our last session because school holidays are coming up.
Yes.
So it's our last session for 2 weeks or so. Okay.
Yes, for the little holidays. We're back on the 16th, though.
Are we back on the 16th? Well, you back on the 16th. Here's the exciting thing. I'm not back on the 16th because I'm going to be overseas. I'm going away to Europe, believe it or not.
Wow.
I'm taking a group of boys on a hockey tour. So we're going off to Amsterdam, and then we're going to Belgium, and off to Germany, and back to Holland or the Netherlands. So we're in for an exciting time. But it brings me all to this thing with euros. And guys, when you've got to buy euros, then you watch that exchange rate like you can't believe. So you go off to the bank, okay, and you go off with a full like 10 Rand 50, and you say, I got 10 Rand 50. How many euros can I get? The guy says, well, you can get one. Okay? And then you realize the importance or how sad the exchange rate is for us in South Africa. Okay, so now, what was the highest? Okay, we've done that. Number C. Both rates fluctuate a lot over the period, but show an overall trend which can be seen in spite of the fluctuations. What is this trend? Well, let's have a look at this trend. Okay, so the trend is basically, guys, there was an increase. Let's draw it. Can you see this? There's a basic increase and then a decrease. So what's the trend? The trend is from the year 2000, both the dollar as well as the euro begins to increase. And you can see it by that line that we've drawn over here. So it's beginning to increase, and then suddenly in 2002, there was a slight drop. Okay. And I remember being overseas in 2002 when the dollar just went crazy. In fact, if I remember correctly, it was round about 13, 14, in fact, no, it was about 10, 11 Rand to the dollar at that stage. And the pound was close on 20 Rand for 1 pound. It was just absolutely horrific. And at that stage, I was working overseas. I was actually teaching in Lebanon, in Beirut, believe it or not.
Wow.
Okay? And I remember coming home and saying to my wife, my goodness, our salary's increasing every single day because I was paid in US dollars. So every day when the Rand lost a bit of value and the dollar increased in value, my salary was increasing, but it actually wasn't, because I was sending dollars home and getting more for my dollars, which was absolutely fantastic. Okay, so even though the dollar and the euro are increasing, they then begin to drop a bit. Okay, right, next question. During the period illustrated on the graph, was the dollar or euro worth more than the rand? Okay, so generally when we look at this, we can see that with our graphs, let me just get rid of all this stuff, with my graphs generally, okay, the dollar was worth more than the euro. Let's have a look. Dollar higher, dollar higher, dollar higher, dollar higher, dollar higher. Ooh, close, but dollar still higher. Dollar higher, dollar higher, dollar higher, and at that point the dollar was slightly lower than the euro. Okay, but generally for that period my dollar was stronger than my euro. Right, next one. On the 15th of May 2006, the exchange rates were as follows. $1 US was equivalent to 6,42652 ZAR. We'll talk about that now. And €1 was equal to 8,27310 ZAR. Compare these exchange rates with those between 2000 and 2002 as shown on the graph. What is different about the 2006 rates in comparison to the 2002 rates? Right. Firstly, guys, what does ZAR mean? ZAR means South African rands. Okay? So I don't know why ZAR. Where does ZAR come from? Why the Z? Is it Zuid Africa rands? I'm not sure.
I have no clue.
No clue.
I should actually Google that.
Maybe you should Google that. All right. So while Ty Googles why the Z is there, we just got to generally know that ZAR is equal to 6,426,502. In fact, don't even Google. I think I know the answer. In the world of finances, every currency has got to have a code. Okay, and there might be another currency that's got the SAR somewhere. Okay, and so South Africa can't pick up the same thing, and so they would then call it a ZAR. Okay,
Well,
so and that's in the
question.
world of finance, and they normally use 3 letters
For each code.
for each code kind of thing. All right, so I think that's why. But basically, the dollar is equal to 6 Rand 42652 cents. Hold on. You could be sitting there now saying, hold on, Pete, up to every single example we've done up to now, you've always said rands and cents are always 2 decimal places. Okay, so we should say it's 6 Rand 43, not 6,42652. Guys, in the world of finance, they do round off to 5 or 6 decimal places because that comma something of a difference. When you're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars or rands, that comma something of a cent makes a huge difference in the final figure that we're dealing with, especially in the world of finance. I'm not talking about my finance. In the world of my finance, that comma something makes no difference whatsoever, I can assure you. But in the world of finance, where we're dealing with millions and billions of rands, every comma decimal place that we leave out or that we don't use makes an overall huge impact on things. Okay, so in the world of finance, you're not going to round your cents. It's going to be 6,42. Let's have a look. The dollar worth 6 Rand 42 or 43 if we round it, which we're not allowed to. And the euro is about 8 Rand 27 or just above 8 Rand 27. Oh my goodness, I'm really coughing like a dog here. Okay.
Okay.
So, what's the difference? The difference is the euro's worth a lot more than the dollar. Okay. Whereas up to now, in this area, the dollar was worth more than the euro. Okay.
Yeah, your voice is sounding a bit rough.
I think I need a drink of water. I do
Yeah.
indeed. Let's have a break, shall we?
All right. So on that note, we need to take a little break so Peter can gather himself a little bit, make sure he can lather up his voice a little bit, make sure he gets some water. So guys, while he's doing that, you guys take a little break as well. Go get a snack, go get something to eat. Guys, but come back. Stay tuned because there's a lot of stuff he still needs to cover. So guys, see you after the break. Welcome back, Mindsetters, to grade 12 maths literacy. And right after this break, no, I'm kidding, guys. We're going to keep working. I'm going to hand over to Peter. Peter's going to take it away. Peter?
My goodness, I thought we were having a break before I started. That's like finishing before you. Anyway, all right. How's it, guys? We're talking about graph work today. Earlier on in grade 11, we looked at graphs, and if you're watching that program, fantastic. But in all the graphs we've done in grade 11, we've looked at one particular type of graph, or rather we've looked at a set of axes with only one graph on it. Now that we become big boys and big girls, we now start looking at more than one graph on a set of axes. In fact, we start looking at different types of graphs that come on a set of axes, and it's normally when we're making a comparison between one thing and another thing. So, for example, if we're looking at weather temperatures between two different cities, let's say we take one city in the southern hemisphere and one city in the northern hemisphere, and we're looking at the various temperatures. One graph's going to do all kinds of weird things up here because it's summer, and so it's going to be a lot hotter, and another city might be doing some weird things down low on the graph because it could be winter in that particular city. We could be looking at different rainfall patterns. So last year in the IB examination in paper 2, there was a good question there set by, I don't know who, but it was really a nice question where they were looking at different rainfalls between two different cities. And one had a high rainfall over the winter period, and another one had a low rainfall over that winter period. And so we had to compare those two cities' rainfalls. And one of the questions was, do you think these two cities are very close to each other? And obviously the answer we were hoping people would say was, well, no, they're not, because one's got a higher rainfall in the winter months, and one's got a low rainfall in the winter months, but high in the summer. So maybe it's a town somewhere in the Cape province, because the Cape people have a lot of rain in winter. It's always cold and wet, okay? Whereas up here, for example, in Johannesburg, it's always hot and wet. Okay, I'm not sure whether it's hot because we're sweating or hot because of the thunderstorms and the rain. So it's a comparison between two different things, between two different cities. It could even be a comparison, could even be a comparison between two totally different things. For example, temperature and a rainfall in one town or one city or one area. But we're now looking at temperature and we're also looking at rainfall. And we've got a question just like that we're going to look at later on. Okay, so it's drawing and interpreting more than one graph on a system of axes. And not only is it more than one graph, but it could be more than one type of graph. So we could be looking at a bar graph and we could be looking at a line graph on the same set of axes. In fact, that's what we got for you straight away. So let's have a look at it. So here we go. Question number 1. The graph below illustrates the ratio between the wage settlement rates, the line graph, and the consumer price inflation, bar graph, that were achieved during collective bargaining agreements for the period 1990 to 2005. Okay, now we've chosen this question specifically for today for the following reason. Matrix, sometimes you may come across a question in paper 2 and you don't understand the content at all. So for example, in this question we're talking about wage settlement rates. Oh, do I know what that means? And we're talking about consumer price inflation. Oh, do I know what that means? What happens if I'm sitting in my matric exam at the end of the year and I open up the paper and I see things like wage inflation and inflation rate and I'm thinking, I don't know what this means, I don't know what this means. Okay, so you can do one of two things. Either one, you panic, or two, you take heed of this information I'm giving you now. Okay, and here's the information. Don't panic. Just try and understand the relationship between these foreign words and the graph. Okay. Now, what I always tell my boys is this. If you get two different types of graphs, here they are. I've got a line graph and I've got bars. The first thing I need to know is this. What represents the bars and what represents the line? And I say to my guys, the line graph, let's draw a line under those words. So every time I see that word and there's a line under, I know I'm referring to my line graph. What do I mean by that? Let's have a look. So my first thing I'm reading here is this, that the graph below shows a relationship between the wage settlement rates, the line graph. Okay? So I know that my line graph has got something to do with wages. So every time I see the word wages, I'm going to draw a line under that word so that I know it refers to the line graph. So let's look what I've done. During which year was the lowest wage settlement? I've underlined it. So I know they're talking about the line graph, not those bars. During which year does a consumer price inflation exceed the wage? So I've underlined it. So I'm now making a comparison between one graph and the other. Which one? Well, I'm making a comparison between the one type of graph and my line graph. Because there's a line. Study the wage settlement. I've drawn a line. So I know that's referring to my line graph. Okay. And final question, or penultimately, in which year is the largest percentage gap between the consumer price inflation and the wage? And I've underlined it again, because I know every time I see wage, and I'm going to underline it, because then I know it's referring to that line graph. I may not know what on earth it means, but as long as I've put the link between the words and that type of graph, and that's what I've done here. Okay? And guys, in your exam, and ladies, in your exam at the end of the year, if you ever come across a question and you don't know what these words mean, just link the word with the graph, even though you may not understand it. Okay? And that's what we've done over here. So now, let's look at our first question. So basically, if we just first of all get an overview of the graph, here I have the bargaining, it's all about the bargaining that took place when people were trying to get different wage settlements, okay? So some people have gone along, whether they're unions or whether they're individuals, have gone along to their boss and said, right, we need to talk about my wage increase here, okay? You've given me 3% increase. I think I'm worth more than that for the following reasons. In fact, I'd like a 25% increase. What did you say? 20%? I'll take it. Okay, so there's negotiation that's going on the whole time. Right. Do I get an increase? How much is my increase worth? That kind of thing. And they're making a comparison between the wage agreement and the inflation rates. And the inflation rate they are showing as a bar graph. Now, what happens if I don't know what inflation rate means? That's okay for this question, as long as we understand it means the bars. But just for interest's sake, then the inflation rate is basically what they're saying is everything is going to increase by a certain percentage over a couple of years, or every year actually. So this year, for example, I might pay R1 for a packet of chips. I don't know, where do we get chips for R1?
I haven't seen that happen in a very long time.
Very long time. Okay, I know it's quite sad. Okay, so in fact, talking about that, let me explain inflation to you. This is phenomenal. I wish I had this. I must bring it in sometime. I found a menu, I kid you not, from 1971 of a restaurant that's still going today. And did you know that in 1971, I could take, well, I couldn't, I was still a little baby, but in 1971, my folks could have taken themselves, the two of them, plus myself and plus my brother. And the four of us could have gone to a restaurant, we could have had a starter, and I don't know about you, but nowadays I can't even afford a starter.
It's tough.
In fact, life's so tough, I can't even afford a petrol to get to the restaurant. Okay, I hope my boss is watching because we're talking about increases here. Okay, but nevertheless, I could go to a restaurant, have a starter, then have a main course, have dessert, I kid you not, plus I could have a Coke or a Fanta or whatever else I wanted, plus give the waiter a tip. And for a family of four, my total bill in 1971 would have come to, guess what? Time?
12 Rand.
12 Rand. Absolutely wrong. It would have come to no more than 2 Rand. Now that just boggles the mind. That for 2 Rand, I could take my whole family out for a meal. Okay? Starters, main, dessert, and drinks, and then still give the waiter a tip and walk out with a smile, having only paid over 2 Rand. Okay, but in those days, 2 Rand was quite a lot of money.
True.
It was a lot of money.
Even 100 Rand.
Even 100 Rand. I remember as a kid, and I wasn't very small. Okay, but I remember my dad coming home. I must have been about grade 1, so we're not talking that many years ago. About like 35 years ago. But I remember my dad coming home and being absolutely thrilled because he got a salary increase. And Ty's salary increased to 153 Rand a month. And it was meant so much money that he went out and he could afford the installments on a brand new Valiant. And a Valiant is equivalent to about a Mercedes-Benz nowadays. Valiant was like a Lani. If you had a Valiant, whoa,
it was a big deal.
You were a big deal. It was an automatic, it had big seat. You could it was just a phenomenal car, okay? But he went out and bought a brand new car because out of his 153 Rand a month, he could pay his house off every month, okay? He could pay his car installment every single month. He could afford the food every single month. And we could be quite happy and content kids and go to this restaurant for $2 as well. Okay.
That's crazy.
That is absolutely amazing. So what's happened? Folks, what has happened? This horrible thing called inflation has kicked in. In other words, the price of goods have got more and more and more and more expensive. Okay? And so if I were to turn around today and walk into a restaurant with a 2 Rand coin and say, Hazard, I've come for a meal, they're just going to send me off. In fact, we can't even give the car guards 2 Rand anymore. They take that as an insult. Okay?
True.
So life has changed radically, and all because of this inflation concept. Okay? So every year, things are going to get higher and higher and higher. And I'd say inflation this year, or for next year anyway, is going to go radically, unbelievably high for 2 reasons. Number one, the price of fuel has just got totally out of control.
True.
Okay? I mean, I can't believe I'm paying over 11 Rand for a litre of diesel. It's absolutely, you can't even smoke this stuff nowadays. It's too expensive. And secondly, the price of electricity just going higher and higher and higher. And that affects everything we make and everything we use.
Exactly.
So when I want to transport food from one province to another,
You have to pay for fuel.
I'm going to pay for fuel. And when they make all that food as well, they're using
Paying
electricity. So if that all goes up, so watch inflation, eh? Woo, we're going to be paying big bucks. In fact, in a few years' time, people are going to turn around and say, do you know, for 1,000 Rand, I could have a meal one day. And we're going to say, holy cow, how cheap was that? You know?
That was so cheap.
Absolutely. But today, that's like quite a lot of money to pay for a meal. It's quite scary. Okay. So, how did I get onto this? Jeez, we really get on a sidetrack here, but let's try anyway. Okay, so we've looked at this whole thing of inflation and wages. So what's actually happened in 1990, there was an inflation rate of just under 15%, let's say 14%. But wages for this particular company or person went up just under 18%, let's pretend 17%. So inflation went up 14%, wages though went up 17%. Let's have a look at this point over here. All right. Here, inflation has gone up, what's that, by around just under 9%. But salaries went up by nearly 11%. Okay. This guy's very lucky, hey? Because his salary increase is higher than inflation in most cases. Not in all cases. Over here, for example, inflation was about 14, but his salary only went up about 12%. So in other words, what we're indirectly saying is when that kind of thing happens, when inflation is higher than your salary increase, basically you're getting a drop in your salary for the next year. Now I know that doesn't make sense because, hey, I'm getting more money, but your buying power with that money is a lot less than it was the year before. So let's say, for example, for let's say things go up 14%, so I paid 100 Rand last year. This year, I'm going to have to pay 114 Rand for that same item because things went up by 14%. But his salary only went up 12%. So last year, I could afford the 100 Rand item. This year, the next year I go to buy this item, it cost 114 Rand, but with my salary increase, I only got 112 Rand. I can't afford to buy it. So indirectly, my salary's taken a bit of drop in the buying power. Do you understand that? Okay. Now, I know we've got a little sidetracked with this inflation and things like that, but guys, that comes into your syllabus a little bit later on, so I'm not sorry that we've touched on this. Okay. Now, having a look at all this, so this is my wages, and here is all the inflation. Now that I've got an idea, let's have a look at the first question. Question number 1, my giddy aunt, I can't believe we're only on question 1 here, but let's go. During which year was the lowest wage settlement rate achieved? In other words, let's pretend I don't know what that all means. All I want to know, when is the line at its lowest? That's all I want to know. So let's look at our graph and let's have a look. When is the line at the lowest? Guys, I would say my line is at the lowest at this point over here in the year 2005. Okay, how do I know that's 2004? Because the year before is 2004. And after 2004 becomes 2005. So this is 2005, and I'd say that's when I got my lowest wage settlement. All right. Okay. Now, so if you look at that, 90, 92, so the one in between is 91. We've got 2002, 2004, so the one in between is 2003. 2004, the next one's 2005. Do you see how we get that? Okay. Now, let's move on and look at question 2. During which year or years, now listen to this carefully. Sometimes examiners in their question are giving you little hints. And what they're saying here is in which year or years. In other words, maybe, miskin, is there more than one answer? And chances are, folk, there probably is. Otherwise, they would have just said during which year. But now they've put the little s in apostrophe, in brackets, not apostrophe, brackets, all right? My English teacher would die if she heard me say that. So years, the s is in brackets. Why? Because it's saying it could be year, but it could also be years. Generally, when they do that, it means it is years. Okay, so when is it, when does the bar higher than the line? Okay, notice I'm not even using the words now, I'm just using the graphs. So when is the graph higher than the year, or than the line? Well, here's a year, 1992, take note. And remember, when we read bars, we're looking at the middle of the bar. So this bar is in the middle, we don't look at that point, we're looking at the middle. When else? Here's another one. Okay, so it's 1992 and 2002. Got that? Next question. Study the wage settlement. In other words, look at the line graph from 1995 to 2001. Is it generally increasing or is it decreasing? Well, let's have a look at this. Let's say I were to draw a line. So I'm going up, then I'm going down, then I'm going down, I'm going slightly down, a little bit up, down, down, little bit, ooh, nice up, and then down, and then up. What's happening, guys? The graph, yes, it does have little peak moments. It does have little peak moments, but generally, it's heading on a downward trend, okay? And I think my boss at work saw this, and that's why my salary increase is getting lower and lower and lower. Either that or I'm not worth very much. I'm not sure. Okay, so that's what the trend is. It's generally decreasing. Okay, next one. In which year is the largest percentage gap between consumer price inflation and the wage settlement? Let's read that as though I don't know what those words mean. In which year is the largest percentage gap between the bar graph and the line graph? Okay, so which is the biggest gap? Now I've drawn all over this thing, so we're just going to get rid of some of all this, and then we'll be able to answer that question a lot easier. So when is my line and my bar at a great distance? Okay, so looking at that, here we've got about 17, here about 14. I'd say the gap over here is 3. Not much of a gap. Not much of a gap. Oh, here's a gap. Let's have a look. This is round about 11. This is just under 9. So 11 minus 9, round about 3. Oh, here's a gap. Let's have a look at this gap. This one's about 9. That's about 6. It's also about 3. Let's have a look here. Here's 6. And this guy over here is 3. That's also about 3. In fact, maybe a little bit more. So we've got gaps 1990, 95, 2003, and 2005 are the biggest gaps. Now, guys, it's quite difficult for me to answer that question here in the studio because I've got this huge screen behind me. When you answer the question, you've got it nice and condensed in front of you in your desk. You've got a ruler, and you can actually read those measurements accurately and be able to work out the greatest distance, okay? But what the question was asking is, when is the gap between the line and the bar at its largest? And that's what you had to work out. Right. So, and I think that was that. So we're moving on. Now, I always know your time. When you start getting fidgety, it means it's time for a break. Is that true, or are you just bored?
No, I'm good for now.
Okay. So we're moving on?
In fact, no. I think I am getting a bit fidgety.
Okay,
I think
so
we should go for a break.
Do you suffer from ADHD?
I know. Yeah, it switches on and off sometimes.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, it's like my wife. She switches on and off sometimes as well.
Yeah.
But, or she switches me on. Okay, let's go.
Yeah. So guys, I hope this has been helpful so far. So guys, make sure you keep chatting to me. The page is a bit quiet, so I don't know where my matrics are at. This is very important stuff. You guys are writing big exams. So guys, chat to me on the page if you guys are lost anywhere, so we can help you guys out and you can get those questions to Peter. And guys, we're gonna see you after this break. Welcome back, Mindsetters, to grade 12 maths literacy. I'm here with Peter. We've been having so much fun doing the grade 10 and 11 class. Well, grade 11 class, what am I saying? I was with Haley in grade 10.
That's right. But you had fun there as well.
I did, a lot.
Right,
a lot.
great. And guys, today we're going to be looking at graph work again. We're going to look at some complicated examples here. So stay tuned because it's really going to be fun. It really shouldn't fall asleep. Not like the other day. Guy in my class put his head down and went to sleep. I said, "Hey, Jordan, you can't sleep in my class." So he lifted his head and said, "Yeah, I know. If you would just keep quiet, I would." Or I could.
He's a bit of a smart
I am
one.
very smart kid. Okay. Lousy joke, okay? We need more. I need some help.
We need more. Guys, so feel free to post jokes to us and let us know whatever you're thinking. Guys, but please try and make them relevant to the subject because that would be even better. But guys, we're going to see you after this break. Make sure you stay tuned. There's a lot of stuff happening that you guys are going to need to know. See you after.